do men want?
Manifests itself in relationships, and you feel it in relationships, and they can be very powerful spiritually. And if that's what you need, that's what you should go for.
And she said, oh, I'm going to go do a sweat lodge this evening. And I begged her to take me along, and that was about 6 years ago.
Welcome to Speaking of Men. You're watching public access television from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm your host, Mike Rivas. Joining us in the studio today is Louis A. Martin. Louis has spent 20 years as a researcher, writer, and active participant and leader in the U.S. divorce reform movement. He has served as president of Ohio Fathers Family Rights Association, executive director of the National Congress of Men Ohio chapter. He was coordinator for the Regional Alliances and Support Group leader for Family Service Association. He's received recognition as an expert on divorce issues from local and national media, family courts, and legislators. He served as a consultant to professionals, judges, and community organizations on divorce and custody issues, and given public seminars and workshops throughout America. Welcome to the program today.
Thank you, Mike.
Good to be here. Good to see you here. Would you like to tell us a little bit about how you became involved in men's issues?
Well, it was back in 1971, a long time ago. I went through my first divorce at that time. And afterwards, I was watching television in Dayton, Ohio, and the Phil Donahue show, as a matter of fact, when it was held in Dayton, Ohio. And the guest at that time was Charlie Metz. He was the founder of the Fathers Divorce Reform Movement throughout the United States. I was very impressed with what I heard from Charlie Metz, and I made an appointment to see him after the program. I was still more impressed then, and I became member of America's Society of Divorced Men in Elgin, Illinois, and I was a member of that organization until 1980.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet. Well, and you were you were tied into the National Congress of Men for a while also.
Yes, I was. In 1980, I founded our own group in Dayton, Ohio. It was called Ohio Fathers Family Rights Association. And then we went on to organize the entire state of Ohio, the organizations that existed throughout major cities. And we became the National Congress for Men Ohio chapter.
I'll be. Well, that's great stuff. So you've been doing this for a little while then?
Yes, it's been quite a while.
You bet. Well, you at present are the originator and coordinator for something called Manline, which is a man's phone line. Tell me a little bit about that here.
Okay, Manline is a service of our nonprofit organization called Family and Men Research and Information Center in Rio Rancho. We encourage calls from men, though we do not discourage calls from women either, who are going through a divorce, and we provide them with a series of services that will help them get the best results possible as they're going through the legal system.
Right. What's the focus then? Do you get, well, let's see, you were telling me that you would like to try to create a support group out of it.
Yeah, that's one of the services, try to create provide support group services. If we don't have support group services at the time that they do call, what we do is arrange a 1-hour interview with them, at which time they can take a look at the literature that we have available and take it with them, and generally listen and read about guidelines that have helped or have proven effective throughout the country in getting the best divorce settlement.
You bet. You bet. You were saying you think New Mexico is a pretty good state for divorce, don't you?
Definitely. I think that New Mexico is a great state for divorce, particularly for fathers.
Some places it's more on paper than in action, and joint custody is a little more possible here in reality.
We believe throughout the U.S. Divorce reform movement that New Mexico has the most advanced custody laws in the country. We're very proud of it.
That's great. That's great. So 90%, you were saying most of the men call on visitation rights. What, you do get some women calling?
Yes, we do get some women calling. They are generally mothers of men who have gone through divorce, girlfriends, second wives, and they desperately need help for these men. We like to hear from them themselves, but unfortunately we don't.
Right. What is the number for Manline?
Okay, it's 892-5489.
And so 892-5489, and that's 24-hour a day?
24 hours a day, yes. If you don't hear me when you call, you can leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Right. And it doesn't cost a dime?
It don't cost a dime.
All right. Are there, this is a program for men that you're offering, or a support system for men. Do you find that there are more programs generally available for women than men, or what is your viewpoint on that?
Throughout the country, we find that there's more spending on women's programs than there are on men's programs. There are quite a few organizations throughout that cater to women more than men.
You bet. I'll tell you what let's do. Let's take a short break for a commentary from our producer, Mike Krachowski. We hope that you will stay with us because we will be right back.
Hello, I'm Mike Krachowski, producer of Speaking of Men. Last week we aired the second of our two-part series on the first 16 months of our programming on men's issues. We hope you enjoyed those excerpts. 1991 has been a momentous year for men and women. The Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings and the William Kennedy Smith rape trial catapulted the issue of male-female relations to an all-time high of social interest. Let's hope the coming year brings increased dialogue between men and women and helps heal the rift between us. On a local level, Mike Rivas and I have begun planning a modest men's exposition to be held in Harris this coming July. Keep watching Speaking of Men each week for more information on how our plans are progressing. This is Mike Krachowski thanking you for watching and wishing you the best for the coming year.
Welcome back to Speaking of Men. You're watching public access television from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm your host, Mike Rivas. We're speaking today with Louis Martin, who is the founder and director of our local Manline, which is a men's support telephone service that men in the central New Mexico area can call. And what was that number?
That was 892-5489.
You bet. 892-5489 for Manline. That's a 24-hour a day service.
24-hour day. Right.
It's part of a growing support network for men, not only here but across America. Before our last break, Lou, we were talking about the difference between the number of support programs for women and the number of support programs for men. There's a New Mexico Commission on the Status of Women, and there was an attempt, apparently, to create a status on the Commission on the Status of Men. You want to talk about that?
That's correct. That was 2 years ago. There was an attempt to set up a New Mexico Commission on the Status of Men. We talked about it, we tried to get support from it, but unfortunately there was a very negative editorial that appeared in one of our local papers, and some organizations got scared and we abandoned the project, but we'll try again.
You bet. What was the main, what did you feel was the main objection? What did you feel was the main objection to the creation of a men's line, and what did they feel was the main?
Well, at face value, it seemed that the objection was money. It was felt in the editorial, it was said in the editorial that there were more worthy projects to spend money on than a commission on men. we differ with that view, of course.
There's a real denial of men's problems in America, isn't
Very
there?
serious denial, very serious denial.
And of course they see us as merely work objects a great deal of the time.
Walking wallets.
Walking wallets, you bet. Let me ask you how you might feel that men might work together to reach common goals and begin to deal with some of the problems we've got. I know you were saying that you didn't feel that we were nearly as politically active as, say, women are.
That's right. It's been very unfortunate. In the time that I have spent in the men's movement, it seemed to have worked against us most of the time. There was also a denial on the part of men to recognize that the problems that we are facing are primarily political, and they're connected not just to government policy, but also policies coming from the feminist movement.
You bet. You want to give me some examples of, I mean, you'd mentioned some things like National Child Enforcement, et cetera.
Yeah, the National Child Support Enforcement Act was a measure that we feared would be turned into an attack against males that would last for some time. Before the National Child Support Enforcement Act was enacted in 1984, I began to organize the state organizations in the state of Ohio, okay, to see that we would get some fair measures out of it. For example, improvement of visitation rights for fathers, and be more fair about the custody laws that existed at the time. However, it turned out that these items that were very important to men were completely left out of the National Child Support Enforcement Act.
You were pointing out
Yes.
one of the things that a lot of us who are divorced fathers know, that there is an enforcement of alimony, but there's absolutely no enforcement, or next to no enforcement, of child visitation.
Yes, that's what afflicts fathers the most, the inability to have access to their children after divorce, and it's very unfortunate because it's something that is just as necessary for children as child support.
Sure, and we were talking about the fact that abortion as an issue, the unwed father has no say whatsoever in whether the child lives or dies.
That's another area in which there is quite a bit of bias. And a woman can say, I don't want this child, can have an abortion. However, if the man doesn't want the child, he still has to pay child support if that child is born.
Right.
It seems to be a double standard there.
Men and women definitely have some things to work on, don't we? I mean,
Definitely. We need to work together on them.
You bet we do. You were saying that you thought that we got a little bit of a victory on a mediation, and you do some mediation, mediation work, and there was a small dole from the government nationally. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. After the National Child Support Enforcement Act, we lobbied Congress for mediation of post-marital disputes that had to deal with visitation rights. Despite the extensive lobbying that we did, we managed only to get $2 million allotted for national pilot projects that they call.
What organization lobbied this?
It was the National Congress for Men. It was one of them. There were several other men's groups throughout the country who formed a coalition with the National Congress of Men at the time to lobby for this legislation.
You bet. And they gave $2 million.
$2 million for mediation pilot projects throughout the United States, which we felt was kind of a drop in the bucket, but however, it was a very small victory.
Very small victory. How long ago was that?
It's approximately, I would say, 2 years ago, okay, that the legislation was drawn up, and then it was not until recently, probably the beginning of this year, that money actually became available for these projects.
I've known some divorce attorneys who were fairly enthusiastic about the fact that mediation was coming about, and there were some attempts to make divorce a little smoother. You have a book. You want to tell me about that, or you have a book available that people could? They could probably call the line and get information on it. You want to talk about that?
I have published a book called The Divorce Counter-Revolution: What Everybody Must Know About Divorce from the Male Perspective. And that book is being sold for $2 a copy, but it's very helpful to anyone who's going through a divorce, and also to professionals who deal in the area of divorce.
I see. You were saying that that you felt the system coerces men sometimes into giving up their children. Could you give me an example of that possibly? Or?
Yeah, this is touched upon in the divorce counter-revolution. Through a series of coercive measures, men are usually cheated out of custody, even though they may want to have a very good relationship with their children. One of the first things that is done when a father goes through a divorce is that he's moved out of his house. This is the beginning of the end. After he's moved out of his house, and they have a series of hearings later on, and they say, well, since the father is not living with the child, then it would be better for the child just to have continued custody with the mother.
You bet. There are some disparities, say, health is one of those in the way men are treated and women are treated. You were saying, for instance, that men get breast cancer, which I didn't realize, and there's hardly any focus on that. Do you have some other examples on the disparities there that you can think of offhand?
Well, there are many disparities. For example, the longevity of men, which is 8 years shorter than that of women. There's a double standard there. Nobody seems to want to recognize that there is a problem with men concerning health and longevity. Very little has been done towards that. However, if we can imagine a situation in which all of a sudden the newspapers would say women are dying 8 years earlier than men rather, we would find that the legislators would be tripping over each other trying to draft some new law to try to save all these women. But this hasn't been happening for quite a long time when it comes to men. And I believe that's a very serious double standard, something that needs to be addressed.
You bet. You were recently on a national Spanish language program called the Christina Show in Miami. And you guys were talking about men who were physically abused by women.
And emotionally.
And emotionally abused by women. You want to tell us about that a little bit?
Yes, I went to that Spanish-speaking show. I was a little bit disappointed with it because the host of the show and the people who attended the show acted in disbelief that this did happen. And there are very well-known published statistics that it does happen. We had a fellow from California who was a Mexican who was complaining about getting beat up by his wife continuously. And the people were just questioning him, what did you do to make her do that?
Right.
So, this is another example of the double standard and the bias that does exist against men. And it usually is a result of some of the programming that we receive continually, about issues in this country. If we read the newspapers, we find that there only seems to be women issues. The feminist movement itself denies that there are men's issues all the time, and this is a topic that needs to be addressed in the open. And I'm very thankful for you to provide this opportunity.
Well, we had a lady who's a feminist on the show, and she. I thought probably had one of the better grasp of the reason men are trying to change their lives. And one of the things she was saying is one of the things you were, is that women have realized a long time ago that we are, that everything is political. And that approaching things as a human being and as a humanist takes some of the potential for argument out of it. If we try to see each other just as human beings first, perhaps we can begin to, especially in situations like divorce, remove children from those situations where they're caught between a mother and a father who can't seem to bring any resolution to their lives and or the problems they have. You were saying that one of the most common emotional examples of emotional violence against men is denial of visitation. I don't know a man who's been divorced that hasn't suffered that on some level. That wound of having the child just completely removed from your life and then denied access to the child, as if it did not matter to us one way or other. I'm not trying to be negative or anything, but sometimes I think that some women have the attitude that it's all right to do anything they want to us just because we're men. You know, that somehow we don't feel, that we're not interested in fathering, that we don't have emotions.
Not only that, but because there's also no punishment for it. Okay.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's take a short break for another commentary from our producer, Michael Krachowski, and we hope you will stay with us because we will be right back.
In September 1990, William J. Scott began looking for his son Billy, whom he hadn't seen in more than 6 years. Unknown to William, Billy also began a search for his father a few weeks later. In early December, Billy Scott appeared with us on Speaking of Men, hoping to get the word to his father. If you know William J. Scott, won't you help us reunite them? Here's what we know about Billy's father. William J. Scott was reported to have been living in the Albuquerque area for the past 5 years. He's 31 years old, 6 foot 1 inches tall, with brown hair and blue eyes. He may have been working in a local sawmill or lumber yard, though he may be contemplating a move to Alaska. If you have any idea where William J. Scott is, please tell him to call me, Mike Krachowski, at 268-5260, and we'll find a way to get father and son together again.
Welcome back to Speaking of Men. You're watching public access television from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm your host, Mike Rivas. The last break was a short piece from one of our former guests, Billy Scott. Billy's a youngster, 12, 13 years old, looking for his dad. If you have any information, be sure and call the number listed. We're speaking today with Lou Martin. Lou is with the well, he's the founder of Manline. He's a man active in the men's movement since about 1971, but he's a founder of Manline, which is a man's support program here in Albuquerque. It's a phone number, men looking for support and information, especially on visitation, custody, and divorce, can call up and find out how they might approach the problem they have. Lou, we were talking about some of the issues that men are facing in the future here. And I'm wondering if you could give us some predictions for progress and some of the things you think are going to be necessary for men to actually count as a movement in America.
Well, Mike, the issues are still the same. We need to address the problems that exist in the domestic relations courts. What we're facing right now is a breakdown of the adversarial system of divorce. Divorce should have never been taken into the courtroom. Divorce is basically a human relations problem, and it should be dealt by human relations experts. And that's why we've always advocated mediation of divorces. We see some good progress taking place, especially with these pilot programs in mediation, but we need a lot more done. Despite the defeats that the men's movement has suffered in the past, we are beginning to regroup, and by drawing on the lessons from those defeats, and I think the outlook is very good to be able to bring about joint custody laws throughout the rest of the nation, not just New Mexico, to be able to get some enforcement of visitation rights, to be able to take a fresh look at alimony laws, and also to have a different relationship with the feminist movement. What we're trying to say to the feminist movement is, let's move forward in a positive direction. Let's don't depend on children after divorce for financial security. Okay.
That's some kind of good stuff to hear. You know, we look for a win-win situation in this. We're not out to, we're interested in a dialogue. I think Speaking of Men is about that. We would like to be able to address some of those things that are unspoken and begin to get some feedback. And we're always interested in feedback from women's groups who even at any time. So you gave me a little clip which was kind of heartening that I thought we might, it came out on the 20th of December 1991, and I'll hold this up if it's not too bright, and I'll just hold it up for a second. It's from the, well, what newspaper?
The Columbus Dispatch.
The Columbus Dispatch, and it's one-way street. States fail to enforce visitation rights, and it's examples from across the country of men who are paying alimony, of men who are not wife beaters, of men who are interested in their children, and situations where the courts are not allowing them the unfettered or unhampered access to their children that they need. And this is a form of emotional violence, as we said earlier. And it's real heartening to know that the media is beginning to give some attention to that other side of the coin. So any other...
it's very promising.
Very promising. Any other things you might like to say?
Well, I like to stress the fact that mediation should be the way to go in divorce. Any of the men or women who call man line,
what was
I
the number
stress
at
the
man
fact
line?
it's 892-5489.
892-5489.
And anybody who calls man line, the first thing that we're going to talk about is a mediation of divorce. If there's absolutely no possibility that a divorce can be mediated, then we provide a referral to a good attorney, especially a father who has gone through a divorce, and that's probably the best attorney that you can get.
You bet. You know, I like the fact that you were saying that we need to change from the adversarial form, and that's certainly what it's been in the past, is just an out-and-out war that emotionally devastates and scars both the man, the woman, and particularly the child for years to come.
Definitely.
It's a real destruction of the labors and of the fruits that the marriage has borne over the years. So, what was that?
I'd like to, it's 892-5489 is the telephone number.
Right.
Okay, I'd like to point out, if I may, one last thing. Recent statistics that were published by the Census Bureau shows that mediation has definitely good results for children. It was found that the overwhelming majority of fathers who had gone through mediated settlements are more likely to pay child support than the ones who go through the adversarial system. Thank you.
You bet. Listen, we'd like to thank you for coming on the program today.
Thank you.
And it's been a real interesting show. And we'd like to thank everybody who has helped make this program possible, especially our crew who volunteers their times and efforts for this. We'd also like to thank our viewers for watching. If you'd like to comment on this program, watch for our phone number and address in the credits. We're always interested in feedback, and that means you. We don't know, we don't know what directions you want to go unless you let us know. Albuquerque viewers can see repeat broadcasts of this program if they're interested in doing so. Look for the dates and times on the channel, 27 programming calendar. This is Mike Rivas reminding you to stand if you can, run if you have to, but don't quit. Bye-bye.